Yes, yes, absolutely. Just 2 to 3 minutes, sir. Okay, so dear participants, now we have in the second session of this 6-day ATAL FDP program, or which is going to be held in the last day, that is 11th of January 2025. So we have with us Dr. Saugat Bhattacharya, and we welcome you, sir, on behalf of Netaji Subhash Engineering College and Applied Electronics and Instrumentation Engineering Department. So I would like to take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce Dr. Bhattacharya to the participants. An assistant professor in the School of Computing, Engineering and Intelligent Systems, Ulster University, London Dairy Campus. His research interests are in brain-computer interfacing, neurotechnology, human cognitive augmentation, artificial intelligence, data analytics, and machine learning, and its application in human-machine interaction and neurorehabilitation. He has over 70 publications in the form of peer-reviewed journal and international conferences. He is a recipient of multiple grants as principal and co-investigator that includes the US-Ireland R&D Partnership Program and AMRC Equipment Grant amounting to a total value of over 3 million. He is also serving as a treasurer of the IEEE EMBS UK Ireland chapter, early career researcher representative at the Ulster University Research Culture Steering Committee, and associate editor in Frontiers in Medical Technology and MDPI Brain Sciences, and as guest editors in Frontiers in Neuroscience, MDPI Sensors, and also International Conference on Intelligent Robots and Systems. So today we are extremely honored to have with us Dr. Bhattacharya, and we are privileged to have you to share your insights with us today. So I am handing the session over to you, Dr. Bhattacharya, so that you can start the session and enlighten us.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shah. So I'll start off. So today I'll be talking about how we can achieve next level human augmentation through the use of brain-computer interfacing technology. It might be a bit different from what you have from the topics so far covered so far, but hey, this is the next hot topic, and a lot of funding is going into this form of research. So before I begin, this is a just brief introduction of from where I am exactly. So not many people know about Northern Ireland. So Ulster University is a multi-campus public university which is spread across the whole of Northern Ireland. It's actually a small country, part of the United Kingdom, and it was established in 1865, so it's pretty old, but yeah, again, not many people know about it. And Londonderry is, as you can see my marker, Londonderry is just bordering the Republic of Ireland. So we border the Republic of Ireland as well as and the United Kingdom. So I belong to the Intelligence Systems and Research Center, which has number of facilities. For example, we have the Northern Ireland Functional Brain Mapping Facility, where we house the only magnetoencephalography machine in the whole island of Ireland. Then we have a spatial computing and neurotechnology innovation lab, where we use various technologies that includes virtual reality, eye tracking, and as well as brain-computer interfacing technology to develop innovative rehabilitation or even neuroergonomics technology. And we also house the high performance computing facility, where we can carry out any form of highly intensive computation. So within the center, I belong to the cognitive computational neuroscience and neurotechnology team, and we are a small group. The team lead is Comfat, and his mainly uh, He His research is mainly on cognitive and decision neuroscience, brain disorders, artificial intelligence. And then there is Professor Girijesh Prasad, who is also the director of the NIFBM facility, and he works on BCI neurorehabilitation, brain disorders, and artificial intelligence. And then there is me, and Dr. Shah has already introduced me quite well, so I'm not going to repeat what she had just spoken. So as of now, I uh, just for us, just a brief information that as of now, I'm supervising three postdocs and eight PhDs, and the new competition is already out for more PhD students. So I'll share the links with you at the end of this talk. So who am I? I so my research is mainly focused on developing brain-computer interfacing facing technology. But for what purpose? First, I started off with robotic limb control. So we used by DCI to control robotic limb movement. And then I went on to neurorehabilitation. And this is like a continuing work, which I'm collaborating with Professor Prasad on developing neurorehabilitation therapy for stroke patients. And then right now I'm more focused on human machine teaming and group decision making, and I'm collaborating a lot with Professor Kongfact there on this regard. And based on my many years of understanding of brain computer interfacing technology, neurorehabilitation technology, and even decision making technology, we realized that basically we also need to monitor the mental state of humans, because otherwise the whole BCI technology fails, because we are not exactly monitoring the mental state of humans and not taking any preventive action, because the human mind keeps on changing, as people who work on neurotechnology would attest to that. So today I'll be talking about human augmentation, and then I'll move into brain computer interfacing and neuroergonomics. I'm not going to get much into it because I know Professor Kunar had also given a talk a few days back. And then I'll talk primarily more about my research on augmenting human performance using brain computer interfacing. So today we will be focusing more on decision making, group decision making, and how we have successfully actually detected the onset of mental fatigue on participants. So, what do I mean by human augmentation? So, Moore in 2008, he had defined it as such that augmentation refers to a very broad range of techniques, approaches aimed at augmenting body or cognitive functions through either through performance enhancing drugs or prosthetic medical implants or even human computer teaming. That res and the results This results in improved characteristics uh, and capabilities that might be exist beyond the human range as well. So in short, what we mean by human augmentation, or what we strive to achieve through augmentation, is how can we improve our own abilities, a human's ability, beyond our existing range, beyond our existing capability. And there have been a lot of movies and video games based on human augmentation. If you remember, there's Spider-Man 2, where Dr. Octopus had those augmented arms. And then if you're into gaming, then there is Machina Deus Ex, and so recently there was Cyberpunk 2077. So these are all examples of human augmentation in our media. So how can we achieve human augmentation? It's divided into a few sections. The first is physical augmentation, where they are exoskeleton technology or prosthetic technology or even your wearable technology. Then there is cognitive augmentation, which is brain computer interfacing or nootropics. Nootropics are basically cognitive enhancer drugs. And then there is sensory augmentation, where you have bionic eye and then cochlear implant. And through there's genetic augmentation, which is using the CRISPR technology, you can carry out gene editing. So all of these technologies, I mean, a lot of researchers are working on these technologies, and and there have been a lot of articles or journal papers that have come out that supports the use of this technology. For example, physical augmentation is now being widely used within the military for patients with disabilities. As I primarily work on cognitive augmentation, that is, how can we augment the human mental state or the human capacity using brain-computer interfacing technology. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So, brain-computer interfacing is a communication system that does not depend on the peripheral nerves and muscles. So it basically what it does is that it bypasses the completely the neuromuscular communication system. So it's directly you can control or you can send commands directly from your brain to any peripheral devices like a computer or any electronic device that exists. The pipeline is not that simple, but in this slide, you can see it's quite very simple. So first, we carry out some kind of mental task. We ask the participants or we ourselves carry out some form of mental task, and we acquire the signals that originates in the brain either through your EEG sensors or MEG sensors or FNE sensors, any form of sensors that can record brain signals. Then we process those signals. There are a lot of existing signal processing techniques available during with which time frequency available, time series, then sensor space level, level, and then source level analysis techniques are there through which we can carry out signal processing to identify the characteristic brain signatures for each of those mental tasks. And then we use a classifier to classify, basically to generate the commands, and then we send those commands to any kind of peripheral devices. And now most of the research now you'll see that it incorporates no more a open loop system, it's a closed loop system. So we send a feedback, a form of response that indicates the performance of the participant back to the participant in near about real time, so that either the participant can improve or change their operant conditioning, or we can also retune the whole classifier or the machine learning system to incorporate the changing brain state of the participant. So we use either electroencephalography, which I mean most you should know. It's basically a scalp recording of electrical activity, and it's all usually in the form of microvolts. And generally we use EEG neuroimaging for to identify neural correlates and for diagnosis purpose. Magnetoencephalography is not really not used widely. There is only, for example, there's only like 10 centers in the whole of United Kingdom that has magnetoencephalography centers. So what it does is that it records the magnetic field created by the currents in the cortex. So if, as you can see, it's kind of like a bulky system which requires huge space to incorporate the sensors, the helium sensors, and it needs to be fitted within a magnetically shielded room. But there is an advantage of using magnetoencephalography. It is really useful. It is really useful to localize any affected regions before surgery, or it is very good for source level analysis or to find any form of neural correlates for cognitive processes that are quite complex and encompasses the whole brain. But nevertheless, whatever, if you're using EEG or MEG, it does not matter. Finally, we try to identify different functions. Like we might do a frontal lobe analysis to find the reasoning, the memory, or the movement or intelligence of a particular person. Or we can use the parietal lobe to identify correlates related to reasoning again, or intelligence, or language, or the temporal lobe can be used for speech, behavior, vision, and so on. The occipital lobe is used for vision as well. So basically, it depends on our research question, on our research hypothesis, what we are trying to exactly extract from the brain. So through brain-computer interfacing, so far, brain-computer interfacing started at around 1970s, and initially it started. It Researchers began to study brain-computer interfacing technology to allow people with disabilities to communicate or control processes. And so far, we know of there are a lot of thought-controlled wheelchair or upper limb processes, cursor control, and then there's virtual keyboards, BCI spellers. They are all tried and tested out technologies in the world right now. But eventually, from the advent of this century, we started, or researchers started looking into how brain-computer interfacing and how it can improve our human cognitive capacity. So this is where the application of neuroergonomics come in. So now people started looking into neurogaming, where now instead of even using your limbs, you can directly use a VR headset, or even in a 2D display, you can directly get play the game using your mind, or even neuromarketing. Neuromarketing is pretty well known as of now. We can identify the preferences of items or products based directly from the brain itself, and simply, companies are investing in neuromarketing so that they can target consumers based on their preferences. Then there's speech. uh, Since the advent of LLM technology, speech-based brain computer interfacing has taken a jump over the last 3-4 years. There you'll see a lot of nature papers now that are now decoding speech production, speech reasoning, even part of speech tagging, using brain computer interfacing and speech technology there. And then brain computer interfacing is quite frequently used in driving as well. We can Sorry, is there something going on in the background?
I have muted. Please proceed,
Okay.
Dr. Bhattacharya.
So driving is mainly based. We can measure the cognitive state, whether the person is feeling fatigued or whether drowsy or not. We can also control the movement or control the driving simulator directly using brain computer interfacing technology. Now, lastly, the military has actually been funding a lot, giving a lot of funds in military, and I personally have been working on with the military like a few years back on developing brain computer interfacing technology to improve their decision making skills on the field. So this was before I joined Ulster University. I was working with the a DSTL lab in UK to on that particular project. So these enhancements that I have talked about, they all fall within the umbrella of neuroergonomics. And what does is that it tries to understand the relationship of self or us human with the environment. It basically gives us an idea of how we perform a particular task in an environment, in a daily real world scenario, how a task is affected by the environment. That is the ergonomics capacity, and basically how can we tune ourselves, or how can we tune the BCI technology to incorporate those inputs as well to improve our skills to improve the performance of the brain computer facing technology. So it encompasses a lot of other fields. It's an interdisciplinary field which includes neuroengineering, neuroscience, neurofeedback, neurostimulation. Then there's cognitive science, uh, human factors and neuroimaging, physiologies, and psychology. Actually, psychology is missing from the slide, but yeah, psychology is a very important field within this neuroergonomics. And then there's computer science as well. So through neuroergonomics, we try to understand or we try to develop a relationship between the brain, the body, and the behavior. The behavior is how we react to the environment, and obviously the inputs that we receive from the environment. So this is it's form of like a continuum where we are developing a system or we are developing an interconnected network between the brain, the body, our behavior with the environment and the environment's feedback. So in this case, we just don't have to rely on brain related systems. We also need to record physiological systems as well as camera or motion tracking systems. So this is part of the introduction, and now I'll my start my talk on how what we have done so far on to augment the human decision making capacity. So here we have billions. Now we know that there are billions of decisions. We make billions of decisions every day. Generally, every day after we wake up, we start deciding on a lot of things. We start deciding on what we are going to have for breakfast, or what we are going to shop, what groceries do we need to shop, and so on. So there are a lot of lot of decisions that we make daily in a day to day basis. Some of these decisions, as for example, that involves a particular individual, it might not be important for the rest of the society, but there are certain decisions that affects the society as a whole. Few examples would be, government policy making. So each policies, the government, they sit down together, they discuss, they argue, and then they reach a particular decision. So that's basically a critical decision making. The military uses critical decision making a lot. Their split second decision basically is kind of like a life on that scenario or loss of livelihood scenario. Then there's a lot of critical decisions that are being made in the hospital or even in the stock markets or businesses. There are a lot of decisions that are made by the business people, whether they want to invest in a certain product or not. So this kind of decision making affects the society as a whole. So, decision making is defined as a complex cognitive process that involves the evaluation of options and the selection of a course of action among several possible alternatives. So this is one form of decision making where we have, but there are different forms of decision making. Like there is moral decision making based on which and then there's sequential decision making based on our decisions from past events. How does those past events affect my current and future events? And then there's social decision making. How does the environment affect your decision making capacity? And then you are given numerous choices. For example, you go to a restaurant and you're given numerous choices. What food would you like to have? And so you evaluate on those choices. It depends on your anticipation of reward. It depends on your expectancy. It depends on the probability and risk. And then after this evaluation is made, then you make your choices. So if you break them down into different components, then we know that first, uh, the brain region will be activated based on the identification of the scenario and identification of the choices. Then the second brain activity that would take place is our assessment. How do we assess each of those choices, and how do we value the different outcomes? How do we weigh the risks and rewards, and how can we integrate the emotional and social factors into the decision making process? So all these falls within evaluation. And then finally, when we are ready, we make our action. So action is again a brain activity That is basically our motor imagery activity. We make our choice by either selecting some form of stimuli, some form of reaction to the particular options given. So I generally, and most of the neuroscience community, we generally work on perceptual decision making, and that is the act of choosing one option or course of action from a selection of different options. So what they do is we or the participants, they are supposed to interpret the sensory information that is made available to them, and then from after evaluating those information, they are supposed to make a decisions. Now you can see here that this is an example of, say, this is a city life example. Then this is the sensory information that the particular user sees. So for example, the decision can be whether to cross the road or not. So based on this environment, the participant will evaluate whether it's a safe bet to cross the road or not. And so this is what is actually the perceptual decision making process. After that, you make your decision whether to yes, cross the road, or no, don't cross the road. So that is basically your response. The response is also your speed, the speed in which you make this decision. Like that's the reaction, and that's the response time to the stimulus that has been shown to you. Now, this sensory information is not the only factor that affects the decision making process. There would be other internal factors as well, like your health condition, your motivation, your fatigue level, your memory. Like from past events, you might say that, okay, maybe crossing the road was not that safe in the past activity, so let me be more cautious now. So these kind of internal factors also plays a huge role alongside processing the quality of the sensory information to finally reach a to finally reach a decision. So we do have perceptual decision making within our day-to-day life activity in the present. A lot of medical imaging now, they use AI tools alongside, and they provide assistance to the engineers or to the experts in providing suggestions on what the particular ailment is. And then there is, again, through computer vision technology, military and security surveillance officers in the military and security industry, they use AI tools to basically identify persons of interest. Again, decision AI and humans, they work hand to hand in environmental monitoring, or in airport control system, or even for manufacturing and quality control. So in today's world, after the advent of like the deep learning technologies, we do have human in the loop traditional decision support systems. But these kind of individual decision making, they tend to degrade with time. And why is that so? Because if you are getting a lot of information in the shortest possible time, then it's very hard to get to extract good information out of those. And that's why quantity and complexity of data actually degrades the decision accuracy. And then not all informations are useful information. Most of the information that both the human and the AI agent receives, they would be irrelevant information, and they would be filled with clutters. So it is the job of both the AI agent and the human agent to identify or remove these clutters and only work on the relevant informations, which might again take a lot of time. And that's why in high stake or time pressured situations, individual decision making tends to fail. From a human angle, fatigue is a very important factor that affects the decision making capacity of a particular human. Then also the mental workload. Mental workload is again relates to previously what I said. If you have huge amount of data coming in and you have to process this data in a limited in a limited amount of time, then it adds to your mental workload, which will add to the onset of fatigue, and your attention level will also drop, and eventually your decision making skill or your decision accuracy would degrade over the time. But most animals and so then we started thinking about how about groups. Why don't we, instead of getting into instead of looking into how individuals can improve their skills or decision making skills, why don't we use groups of people? I mean, most people, even humans, including most animals in this planet, they live in groups and they make decisions in groups. A group can do a lot of activities, or can do have advantages which even normal individuals cannot. They have augmented action capacity, where the members of a group can join forces to do something that is beyond the strength or endurance of a single individual. And then there is increased sensing capacity, where a group has the higher probability of finding resources and noticing danger. And groups also have increased cognition and intelligence, where groups show emergent intelligent behavior, which tends to be more powerful than that of individual members. So when researchers started thinking of that, then they eventually coined a term called wisdom of crowd. So wisdom of crowd was first conceptualized, or it was first observed in 1907 by Sir Francis Galton. So in that, it was there's a story, there's a bit of story here. At that time, there was this county fair, and then he asked around 787 people to guess the weight of an ox, and everyone gave their own judgment. Everyone was like everyone, whether they were quite close or whether they were far off from the actual weight. But eventually, when Sir Galton actually aggregated all their opinion, all their responses, he found that the average was very close to the actual weight of the ox. And this astounded a lot of researchers. This made researchers curious about this form of group activity, or how how does the group perform so well when in such kind of uncertain scenario. And then there have been a lot of research from the 1950s to recent times, where they started looking into how groups actually augment the decision making capacity. And the wisdom of crowd was first coined by Swirsky in 2004. The link is there in the yeah, just below the picture there. So what he said was that collective intelligence emerges from the aggregation of individual judgments, opinions, or decisions within a large groups. And why individual collective intelligence works well, why wisdom of crowd works well, because there's a diversity of opinion, and then there's decentralization because no one is dependent on the other. And then there is aggregation. Finally, through aggregation, we reach the mean, or we reach the actual weight quite easily. And many people use it in many industries use it for crowdsourcing use works and market prediction work. But this is the principle that group decision or group performance or group decision making works on. It is the wisdom of crowd, the way group decision makers rely on wisdom of crowd. So if you are to compare between what group decision making is and what individual decision making is, so the advantages are obviously group decision makers. There's an improved decision processing time of individual group members, because the information are actually disseminated or segmented between the different members. There's reduction of cognitive biases. We as human beings are biased creatures. We are always biased towards a particular cue, a particular stimuli. And when we are working in a group, then the cognitive biases are reduced. There is enhanced collaboration. We after a few slides, we'll show that how the group decision making has actually improves the decision accuracy of participants. And it is also better at handling complex problems. Again, because the complex problem can be broken down into smaller pieces and each individual group member can work on them individually. But again, there are some disadvantages as well. There is this phenomena called groupthink and conformity pressure, where you might find members within the group that are very overconfident, and they try to actually navigate the or pull the decision of the group towards their own decision. And if the other members of the groups are not engaged, then basically the group decision making will obviously move towards those very active boisterous members. So even if the second disadvantage over individual decision making is that it has slower decision process response. So since in this scenario, since we have to wait for all individual members to make their responses, so the overall decision response time it's much slower than individual response times. Then there is less accountability. Yeah, as I was, it ties up with the groupthink disadvantage. Once you see that there are members who are over enthusiastic and they are trying to pull the decision, the decisions to their own opinion, then the members will either get bored or they would just give up and say that okay, fine, whatever you say. So these leads to risky shifts, like because even if you're overconfident or very confident on your approach, it doesn't mean that you would be a good decision maker. And so your group decision also might fail because you're making all the highly confident decisions, or you're pulling the group decision towards yourself, but it does not mean that your decision is correct. So again, we are back to ground zero, where we are not exactly improving the decision making capacity. So as of now, the strategies of aggregating individual decisions, the traditional strategy was one head equals to one vote. So it's simple, like how a democracy works. We just vote for uh, one leader, and that's it. That vote is counted and aggregated or summed up, and whoever gets the majority wins. But this, as we have seen, it does not actually work because there are a lot of disadvantages, as I just discussed in the previous slide. So then psychologists, they started weighing those decisions. So each decisions are based on their reported confidence as well. So psychologists, what they did was, now, okay, you have been given this decision, you have been given this task, you made a decision. Now report how confident you are on that particular decision. So these are then weighed over on each decision, and to up to an extent, we do get an improvement over our traditional decision aggregation strategy. But again, we as human beings are very bad at estimating our own confidences. So again, there is an age-old problem that comes, is that if you are not self-aware, our self-awareness is not that great. So if you're not aware of our confidence towards a decision, then again, it might lead to a erroneous response. So sometimes group decisions fail because they have these disadvantages, and as I had said, because of metacognitive failure. I mean, you might be making wrong decision, but you are overconfident. So when you are weighing your confidence with your decision, then again you are actually pulling, since because your confidence level is very high, you are pulling the overall group decision towards your own opinion. There's psychological entrapment as well, which relates to your group think, where the minority members are forced to believe that okay, the majority members in the group are they are maybe suggesting that it's a good decision, that that we should all go towards, say, decision A rather than decision B. But they might know amongst themselves within the minority that decision B would be much better than decision A. The second second guessing comes with psychological entrapment. So due to groupthink phenomena, you might
Assange
start second
might
guessing your
also
own
have
decision, and then you might
influenced
start following.
criticize Vijay Kar for allegedly making unacceptable comments on the state's history and traditions. Carr appeared on Rhea Apathy's podcast and said women in an Assam village had the power to convert men into a goat or any other animal. He claimed they turn men into a person again.
Sorry, there's a uh, someone is unmuted.
Dear participants, please mute yourself for uninterrupted session.
So, what are the mitigation strategies? How can we? So, the mitigation strategies are through deliberation and participation. There must be a dialogue between all members, an equivalent dialogue. There must be a feedback mechanism for all members as well. Or we can weigh the decisions and add objectivity. That is what we do in our neurotechnology, in our BCI research. So, how can the brain signals help? See, the group decisions are superior to individual decisions in many cases, and not just thanks to more information, but also because of tone of voice, facial expression, body language, eye contact, etc. So, through BCI, we tap into the unconscious mind of individuals without requiring any form of verbal communication or body language. And through that, we can get into we can benefit from the power of the unconscious mind. We can tap into the clear responses that can be found within the brain that without any biases from other group members from the environment or from explicit verbal or body language as well. So this is our framework. So we in this case, we're using an EEG system. We record the brain activity while the participants are performing some form of decision-making task. And those brain activities, we use the BCI system to estimate their confidences from the brain activities. So then these confidences are called objective confidences, and these confidences are weighed together and then they are aggregated. So what we found was that we showed improved accuracy. We had error, which we increased the robustness because we could easily implement error correction. We enhanced the information processing, and I'll show you in a few slides how we achieved faster decision making as well. But we made the whole system, the whole collaborative brain-computer interfacing decision support system more adaptable to learning. And it reduced the training time, and we incorporated more diversity of thoughts and hence led to the distribution of the cognitive load. So we adopted a simplistic BCI pipeline because our main main concern or main objective was to find those neural correlates related to decision accuracy and decision confidences. So this is the approach that we implemented. So this is very standard. We use bandpass filter that we carried out corrections, and then we segmented the signals based on their stimulus or their responses. So stimulus locked epochs are it's quite well known where we segment out the EEG signals from the onset of the stimulus. But in our case, we prefer to use response locked epochs because the decision making, all the decision making processing takes place just before we make the responses, and so that's why we get much better neural correlates when we are looking from the perspective of a response locked epoch. And then we classified our models based on either they were for correctness, that is correct decision or incorrect decision, or for high confidence and low confidence. So we tried out our model, we validated our model on numerous exhaustive experimental validation. We underwent an exhaustive from controlled experiments that incorporated visual matching and traditional and realistic visual search to face recognitions for surveillance applications and event target detection from a video feed. So I'll be discussing more on the recent results. So this is the first experiment that we had designed. Here we had generated a dynamic environment where a soldier is walking along a corridor with multiple doorways. And the task was to decide whether the character was wearing a helmet or a cap. So the person wearing a helmet was considered to be friendly, and the character wearing a cap was considered to be our enemy. So this is an example of how the whole experiment looked like. So as you can see that the character appears on the screen only for 250 milliseconds. So it's very complex for it's very complex for the participants. And the participants were also only given around 2 seconds to respond and 2.5 seconds to respond their confidences as well. The second experiment that we decided was it was a more complex experiment where now we had a user stationed at an outpost, and it observes a character moving in. So again, the task is the same. You are either wearing a helmet or a cap. Identify whether the character coming towards you is wearing a helmet or a cap. And then to add time pressure, to add another constraint of time pressure, we added a reward and penalty system. So it means that if you are quick, if you are quick to respond and your decision is correct, then you will get the maximum reward. But if you're slow to respond and your decision is not correct, then you will get the maximum penalty. So so this added an extra element to the whole to the whole task, to the whole experimental setup. And obviously the participants were paid extra based on their performances, based on the reward and penalty system. So this is again an example of how it looks like, how the whole setup will look like. So the closer the character is to the screen, the closer you will be the more you'll be penalized. So we tested 10 participants for both experiments, and we found that they were approximately, for the first patrol experiment, they were 80% correct most of the time, and for the outpost experiment, they were 86% correct or accurate. So now this is where we started our analysis from. So now for the patrol experiment, we know that there is a chance of improvement of around 20%. And for our outpost experiment, we know that there is an chance of improvement of 14%. So our next question was, how can we achieve this level of improvement? So before we move on, so this was our question. So to answer our question, we started we started studying their confidences as well as the neural correlates related to their confidences, as well as the neural correlates related to their decision accuracy. So we found that there is an emergence of confidence from the EEG signal, even from stimulus locked events, especially if you are trying to separate the low confidence with the high confidence. But we found a much more better neural signals or neural signatures from the response locked event, as you can see from the grand averages. And we tried it out with all the experiments that I had mentioned. And you can see that from the grand averages for all the experiments except the outpost experiment, we saw that there is a distinct ramping up activity for each decision confidences, for starting from low to medium to high and to sure. And this actually validates or vindicates our claim that we should stick our analysis, we should keep on working on the response locked event. So based on this, we can identify now that, okay, we are getting neural correlates related to, we are getting neural signatures related to the decision confidence of each individual. So this was a big win for us. Then we looked into the correctness, that is the decision accuracy. How does the brain behave during the correct and the incorrect responses? So again, we stuck to our decision response locked activity, and then we found that there is again there's this significant difference right before the response has been made. And this does not only, it's not only localized to a particular to the parietal brain region. It is actually a it actually covers both the frontal and the parietal brain region. So we termed this particular potential as a decision related potential. And we found this say similar kind of marker, albeit weaker neural markers for the outpost experiment. Now, why? Because in the outpost experiment, since it's more realistic, so there is no fixed stimuli event for the outpost experiment. And so the onset of stimuli for the individual participants are different. So, so what happens is that since we are looking into the grand averages are canceling out because uh, the trigger informations are not really time locked in this case. But even with this constraint, even with this advantage, we do see that we do get again significant response locked activity just before the decision locked decision related potential just before the response has been made. So now to answer our question, like how can we improve the decision accuracy from 80% or to 85%? And we also wanted to add another element, like how can we incorporate or how can we improve the decision response time of the group. So first, what we did was that we removed the stimulus event. So now what happened was now we only have the response event information. And once the response has been triggered by the participant, there is another AI system that's working in the background that detects the sudden change in the video frames. And that particular video frame is then marked as a stimulus onset. And so we are estimating our response time directly from the response event itself. And then we form groups. So the individuals perform the same experiments in isolation, and then we formed different levels of groups there. And now, how does the anytime collaborative BCI system works? So, say I'll give you an example. Say we have 4 participants, and they are all working together in the petrol experiment. So there is one participant who has already responded. So we mark that particular time point as 0. And for that particular participant, we have the neural signal and the response time. So our BCI, our collaborative BCI system can already start working on developing a decision directly from this participant. Then say after 100 milliseconds, there's another participant who has responded. So our collaborative BCI system will now incorporate both the responses from both these participants and then make a decision. And then after 400 milliseconds, we have 3 participants responding. And so our CBCI system can incorporate the response of all 3 participants and then make their decision. And then say after 1 second, all of them has responded. So we have the complete setup now. All of the participants have responded. So we can use information from all participants to make the final group decision. But in certain such scenarios where, especially in the military scenario, where you have to make split-second decisions like in 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds. So at that time, this anytime collaborative brain-computer interfacing system will have the capacity to provide a suggestion, a group decision, make group decisions based on, say, these 2 participants. And it might not be exact, or it might not be as confident as the responses from all the four participants, but that is still a response. And if time criticality is a factor, then our CBCI system can implement, or we can ask a CBCI system to even make the group decision at an earlier point of time. So this was the result that we saw. So the x-axis here is the group sizes. So we start from group of size 1, that's the individual accuracy. So as you can see, that's 80% and 86% from the outpost. And then we move on to groups of size 2, then size 3, size 4, size 5, and until size 10. And from here we see that the group, it's basically an increasing curve. Like the accuracy is increasing until and unless it saturates. It's saturated for the outpost experiment at around group of size 7, and for the petrol experiment it's saturated at around groups of size 9. But what we also noticed was that pairs and triplets, they tend to have the maximum increase. They tend to show the maximum rise in accuracy. Like for pairs in the petrol experiment, we moved from 80% accuracy to the CBCI giving around 92% accuracy. So this was something that we reported. This was again a win for us because we showed that groups are groups, and even if it does not have to be groups of of large size, but even groups of size of 2 and 3 shows us the maximum improvement in accuracy for in decision making. So, and then we looked into the anytime CBCI system, how do they work? And interestingly, what we found was that there was again increasing rapid transient that plateaus out. But this transient is dependent on the number of decision makers that are actually voting for this group decision. And from here, this again vindicates our claim, our hypothesis that yeah, we don't need all of the group members to report their confidence, but we can work with few group members if time is of constraint, and then we can basically we can show an improved accuracy overall. So the take-home message was near optimal decisions can be obtained well before all the participants have actually responded and reported their confidences. So then we went one step forward. We tried to bring BCI in the wild. And what we saw was that we again use the corridor experiment or the petrol experiment, and we asked participants now, at least for half of the experiment session, to walk in a treadmill. So the speed of the treadmill was around 2.5 kilometers per hour. So what we observed was from that there is no significant difference in decision accuracy between sitting and walking. There is a significant improvement in the distribution of the reported confidences for correct and incorrect trials. And then participants had a faster response time while walking. So again, what we realized, or what the most significant output was from this study, was that improvement in group performance during walking is likely due to the increased level of alertness that contributed to their improved accuracy, which can be seen from the chart again, that walking basically people during the walking sessions, the people were better in responding or making were more accurate while making decisions as compared to when they were sitting. So this is again another work that we are currently doing. One of my PhD students is working on it now. So now we are now trying to move into the territory of teaming humans and machines together. So in our case, what would happen? The question was, how much improvement can we show if we add an AI team member alongside human team members to make group decisions? So we resimulated both the petrol and the outpost experiment here, and we developed different AI agents which had different behaviors. So in this case, since it was a completed PG project, and so we did not really work in developing fancier models. We just changed we just tuned the different neural networks to incorporate these characteristics like balanced rational, balanced underconfident, balanced overconfident, and then biased underconfident and biased mixed. So balanced underconfident is that you tend to make the right decisions, but you're not confident at all. And balanced overconfident is, again, you make the right decisions, but you're overconfident in your estimation. And now you have your biased underconfident, where you're biased towards a particular stimuli, but you're also not confident in your decision making. So we developed AI agents with these different characteristics, and then we paired them. We randomly selected one of these agents, and then paired them up with different human groups. And what we observed was that there is an improvement in accuracy for groups of three humans and one AI agent. And from there basically we it encouraged us to delve deeper into this field of research. And as of now, there is Toby, who is actually working on developing symbiotic human AI collaborative systems using brain computer interfacing. So thanks. This is the group that I have been working on with for the and since, as I mentioned earlier, this project was funded by the UK Ministry of Defense and the US Department of Defense. And now I'll move on to another topic on how we are actually affecting or improving uh, performance, mental state, uh, by measuring their fatigue monitoring, by monitoring their fatigue, and then developing a traffic light system. So in this case, what we are doing is we're not only using EEG or MEG signals, we're also using pupil sizes and then reaction time and a questionnaire. So in this case, in this PhD topic, this is a PhD project actually, and my student is right now drafting few papers on this. But so what we want to do is we want to understand how mental fatigue affects the performance, especially in a neurorehabilitation scenario. But before we even could design the experiment, we had to understand like how does mental fatigue, boredom, and low brain arousal, how they are connected to each other. Because in this case, we are trying to disentangle the effects of boredom and low brain arousal from mental fatigue. Our aim is to find those specific neuromarkers that can be related to mental fatigue. And as you can see from this Venn diagram, that mental fatigue is decreased cognitive capacity, and it has one of these characteristics is the desire to take rest. But mental fatigue and low brain arousal, they are intersect when they become when participants are disengaged and they are spaced out. Again, mental fatigue and boredom, they are basically intersects during lack of motivation and irritability. And all of these mental conditions basically intersect during low response to the stimuli and loss of focus. So it was a very complex problem for us. It took us approximately a year to design the correct experiment so that we can disseminate or disentangle mental fatigue from these other mental conditions. So this is what we did. And how we did it? We did it by developing an adaptive fatigue inducing experiment. So the experiment runs in this form. First, obviously there's a mood screening session, and then we take the resting state of the participants. Then we ask the participant to score their fatigue level. And then we take a pre-task objective measure. Like we use the, so in this case, we have used the psychomotor vigilance task, where a dot appears on screen, and then you have to react to, then you have to click on, when the dot appears on screen, then you have to click the left mouse button as soon as possible. So after this objective fatigue measurement was completed, we asked the participants to carry out an adaptive memory recall task, which was actually a fatigue inducing task. So in this case, we use the standard N-back task. So in the N-back task, you're asked to remember the number, say, N steps backwards. For example, if the N equals to 2, then you have to, and you are shown on screen number 2, then you have to recall that whether 2 steps back, two had appeared on the screen or not. And if yes, then you either press the left mouse button, or if no, then you press the right mouse button. So this is how this adaptive memory recall task was carried out. Oh yeah, and how it was adaptive was because we did not want the performance to affect the participants. We only wanted to see the onset of the fatigue. So we made sure that the performance level of the participant was at around 80%. So the that's why it's called an adaptive memory recall task. Then after that, we again ask the participants for their subjective fatigue score, and then we again take a post-task PVT measure. We use that for our objective fatigue measure again, and then again at the end, we ask them to again screen their mood. So our experiment have somewhat disentangled boredom for most participants. 72% of the participants reported they are not at all bored to moderate level of boredom, but there were very few participants. Significantly, they were very much lower, a low level of participants that had actually reported some level of boredom. So moving on with the participants that did not actually report any, that were within our threshold of boredom, what we saw was that we observed higher reaction time and decreased pupil diameter. So, from the pre-task and the post-task PVT analysis, what we found was that the reaction time was much higher after the fatigue-inducing experiment. So this basically supports our claim that really I mean, fatigue was really induced during the whole experimental session. And we further validated it that using pupil size during using pupil size of eyes, because pupil size is not exactly controllable. It cannot be voluntarily controlled. And it again matches, or we again validate what is available, what literature says is that during fatigue, the pupil size tends to constrict, and this is what this tells us, that okay, so since some form of fatigue took place, so the pupil size constricted after the fatigue inducing task. We also looked into the neural signals for the pre and back task and the post and back task, and we observed high activity in the anterior cingulate cortex region during the post and back task when we compare it with the pre and back task. And this again validates our claim that we are actually closer to, we are observing fatigue. So now we know that before the beginning of a session and after that session, after participants undergo these fatigue inducing tasks, we validated what was already mentioned, or what was already reported in previous psychological and neuroscience papers. But now our main question was like, when does this onset? Can we find the region of onset of fatigue? So this is where we now took our analysis not from the pre and the post PVT tasks, but now we took an analysis. We started analyzing the NBAC task itself. So to analyze the NBAC task, during the NBAC task, we started looking into the band standard deviations of the band power, and and what we saw was this is the result for two participants. And what we showed from here was that the black dashed line is actually when the participant had reported their maximum subjective fatigue score. But the dashed red line is um, when the when there was this major change in variation of the gamma band power across all the regions. So this is the region, this red dash line is the region where actually the onset of fatigue uh, took place. And and how can we validate that it is the onset of fatigue? Because irrespective of the difficulty of the task, the mental fatigue was sustained for across all the different blocks of sessions, or across all the at every 1.5 minutes. This particular the fatigue was sustained over the whole period of the activity. So this we I haven't shown you the main result because we are still writing the paper on this, but this actually and this we developed a computational model, and our results before we even started with the experimental design, and our results our neuroimaging results actually validates that computational model as well. So the main message that we derive from this, or the main point, is that we observe that the average objective delay of the participants' realization of their fatigue state is around 7.5 minutes. So even before we start realize, so that is where our self-realization comes, or our self-awareness comes. We are Even if we are mentally fatigued, we don't realize it for a long period of time. But we can observe their occurrence directly from the neural signals. So where are we going to apply this? We are actually going to apply this in our neurorehabilitation system. So we have a dedicated exoskeleton-based neurorehabilitation system in our lab. We have already built it, and we have tested it out on patients as well. And actually, we observed that the patients used to get tired and demotivated towards the end of the session, because either they did not see any progress, or or basically they were not paying attention, or they lost focus midway. And that is why we went forward and started looking into this, started questioning whether we should also monitor the cognitive state of the participants or not. And that's why we started off with mental fatigue, but there are other cognitive states as well, like stress and attention and so on. So we tried it out with so we tried it out our neurorehabilitation therapy on a we added this element in our neurorehabilitation therapy. So the participants were trained on 80 trials, and they underwent a real online BCI session, a therapy session for 200 trials. And then each of these participants were asked to report their fatigue, their boredom, and motivation after every 40 trials. And we validated this whole paradigm on 14 participants. Again, this is a very recent results, and we are again writing a paper to report these results. So I'm not showing you the main results. I'm just giving you uh, uh, the main byline. So we are actually observing. So again, here you can see that we are observing the onset of fatigue in the feedback session way earlier than the maximum subjective fatigue score, as well as the maximum subjective boredom score of the participants. So we'll be testing this experiment out on on the final system on patients actually. So this is the active BCI system that's available. And now we have already incorporated our passive BCI system, where we are adding a traffic light system into the active BCI system, where it'll detect mental fatigue. It will detect mental fatigue, and then if it's a green, then okay, you carry out with the active therapy. If it's yellow, then basically warns the participants or the carers or the physiotherapist that okay, the participant is getting tired, so we need to shut down the therapy in a while. And if it's red, it means that okay, we need to stop the therapy because the participant is very tired. So this is the team. So there is Kanishk who is working on this. He's just going to be finishing up on September. And then there is Kongfat and Girijesh who are in the supervisory team as well. Other than this, we are also working on observing fatigue during video conferencing meeting. Now, this is something that I myself felt, especially when we have those long online meetings. So we tend to get more tired. We tend to get tired even midway through these meetings. And so can we observe or can we basically develop, can we observe the onset of fatigue during this meeting and basically make this meeting more personalized so that we do not increase our cognitive load, or we do not have a high workload at the end, and we can actually carry out more activities after these meetings as well. So this is kind of like a hyperscanning experiment where we already got the ethical approval. We'll start the recording soon. So there are three or four participants will be sitting down at different locations with an EEG cap on, and then they will be discussing on a topic. And after discussion, they have to reach a decision. So so basically this experiment so all during the whole meeting setup, during the discussion as well as the decision making setup, we will be constantly monitoring the cognitive state, and from there we hope to identify or we will be identify I mean our previous results have shown that we can identify mental fatigue, but we also hope to identify, or we want to study how the decisions are being affected, decision of individuals are affected by the onset of fatigue during these video conferencing setup. So what the reason that we are building this kind of cognitive monitoring system, either for neurorehabilitation or even for like workspace, is because we were trying to develop a more personalized BCI system. So through personalization, we can identify the levels of stress, the levels of fatigue, the levels of arousal of each of personnels within the workforce, and then we can either ask them to take actions so that to get back to their say non-fatigued state, or we can ask them to rest. So basically, it's all moving towards how we can improve our human capacity while not adding extra workload or high workload, mental workload on ourselves. So in this video conferencing, again, Kanishk and Muskan, we are working together on this particular problem. And that is all. I haven't discussed most of the major results in the second half because once the papers are out, then obviously I'll be discussing them. But we have the annual PhD competitions out. I know it's most of your faculty, so you can circulate them to your friends. Sorry, to your students. So we have got two positions out. One is continual learning for modeling non-stationary systems. So this is very similar to BCI. So we are trying to identify the drifts in participants during the course of an activity. And then the second is Neuro AI, that is developing machine learning tools from neuro computational modeling of decision making and learning. So Neuro AI is again something that is trying to bridge the neuroscience understanding to AI capabilities so that we can improve the models to model performance and bring them closer to how a human being thinks. So that's all from my end. Thank you for listening. I am now ready to take in some questions.
Dear participants, first I would like to thank Professor Saugat Bhattacharya for this enlightening, presentation. And now I would like to ask all the participants to ask certain questions or certain queries which you will find, very much interesting to solve in your future research and innovation. My dear participants, I will again ask you to please feel free to ask any kind of questions which is related to today's topic, and in fact beyond the BCI, because he has immense expertise in this domain. So you just feel free to ask Professor Bhattacharya to any kind of concerns and any kind of research collaborations if you want to see, because Professor Bhattacharya has already given us an open invitation that we can collaborate with him and with his lab also, because they are offering PhD positions. And so if you have any kind of plan or any kind of thoughts, you can discuss and you can share with Professor Bhattacharya. And on this regard, I want to tell you that I'm going to share Professor Bhattacharya's email ID as well to you, so that you can contact him further. So, Professor Bhattacharya, it is my honor to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you for your invaluable contributions in BCI. I must say that the participants are very much, engaged in so many aspects you have covered today in neurorehabilitation, where the mental fatigue is primary, the concern and primarily the centered topic of your discussion. So the way you have bridged the gap between, I should say, complex neuroscience concepts and practical applications has been both insightful and thought-provoking. So your session has opened new avenues for us to explore how technology can be harnessed in the context of neuro rehabilitation. And your expertise in BCI has illuminated us that so that how we can push the boundaries of human potential, while your discussion on monitoring mental fatigue in achieving better mental health conditions, or mental outcomes is very much important, because from your session we get to know that how to support individuals in achieving better mental health outcomes, which is very, very important and very significant topic of discussion in nowadays. So your research and insights are not only academically enriching, but I must say I found it hold immense potential for practical real world applications. So on behalf of everyone here, I extend our deepest thanks to you, Professor Bhattacharya, for sharing your knowledge, passion, and vision with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shah, for your kind words. If anyone wants to contact me, you're most welcome. But I would say that we are very, as you see, we are three members within our team, and we complement each other's skills very well. And that's why, that's why we are trying to bridge the gap between computational neuroscience, quantum neuroscience, to technology based, and we're also looking into translating these theoretical understanding into more practical applications. So we are also developing we're in the process of developing some spinouts also as well, based on our funding, based on our research. So yeah, it's very interesting, and as I said, it's the three of us complements each other really well, and so we have that that intensive discussion sessions all the time to further research within our team. But anyways,
Yes, it is a wonderful team, I must say, because I have listened all your team members and all the expertise and what are the, the potential they have actually put in this total research. That is really, really fascinating. So I would like to take 2 or 3 minutes just from you, and I will request all the participants to just switch on their camera so that we can take the attendance of today's session with Professor Bhattacharya. Dear participants, please join us for 2 to 3 minutes to switch on your camera so that we can take our attendance. Thank you so much for being with us. And I would like to, say, Dr. Bhattacharya, that I will look forward to collaborate with you because, when we had in our days in artificial intelligence lab under Professor Konar, then the formation of this vision and this to grow, this BCI activities and BCI research in so large scale that we all have gathered this kind of dream, and you today you have full utilized that dream. That dream is become envisioned, and I'm so happy to see your research work and all the works you are rightly carrying on. So very much congratulations and best wishes for your future work. And all the dear participants, now we will take 2 to 3 minutes break so that we can again join back for the next session with our last resource person, Mr. Shomitra Kaur. So just give us 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you so much, Professor Bhattacharya.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Shah. I'll take my leave now. Thanks for the
Okay.
invite.
Yes, yes.